Yo boys and girls, welcome to the Flame/Gemma League Start Guide. She was a fan favourite in Season 1. I even made a video myself of an aura stacking Flame/Gemma. But XD didn't think she was living up to her name of being a fusion of ice and fire. So in this video I'm going to go over all the changes from Season 1, all the buffs, all the nerfs and everything you need to know if you want to start Ice Fire Gemma. All the information on leveling this character can be found on Maxroll GG. We have leveling guides for all the heroes on that site. We also have endgame guides for many builds. We'll be adding more as soon as possible, so if you want to head on over to there, if you want to learn how to level this character, this video is going to focus more on what you're going to do once you've reached the Nether Realm and how you're going to build your character to have something that is formidable enough to take on, you know, your first traveler, kill all your watchers, and maybe get all your trait deck up and running. But before we get started, if you do find these videos helpful and you've used any of these league starts to start your Season 2 journey, please feel free to leave a like, maybe comment, let me know how it's gone, and yeah, subscribe if you want to get more videos like this. We'll be doing tons of endgame builds throughout the league. Subscribe, ring the bell, and enjoy the rest of the video. So the Ice Fire Fusion hero trait actually received quite a large overhaul for Season 2, but I'm going to focus on 2 hero traits in this video, which are kind of leading me to make this build. So we're going to focus on Restless Icefire, which is the new level 50 hero trait. What it does is it grants you 10% additional fire damage for 4 seconds, up to 3 stacks when using or triggering a cold skill, while Frostfire Rampage is active, and also plus 10% additional cold damage for 4 seconds, up to 3 stacks when using or triggering a fire. So this could essentially be 60% additional damage. And my immediate thought when seeing this was to use it with Cast on Crit Blizzard, because Blizzard applies a resistance debuff to the enemy. Now you might be thinking, well, that's a cold resistance debuff, Milky. Well, the new level 80 hero trait is actually called Seeping In, and what it does is it will get you to treat the lowest between fire, lightning and cold res as the enemy's current fire resistance. So if you're a flame slash build dealing fire damage, we will start to try and reduce the enemy cold res. It's much easier to reduce the cold res through things like Biting Cold, Blizzard, Elemental Destruction, than it is to do the same with fire. So that's why we're going to do this. This is quite a big change for the build. Obviously last season you did go fueling. This essentially set the enemy resistance to 0 all the time, even if you went below that. Now we can really overpen the resistance. We can get it into the negatives and then penetrate even further with elemental penetration. So that's kind of the focus of the build based on the new updated hero traits. Now the way to achieve this, as I mentioned, is going to be a cast on critical strike setup. You're going to use Blizzard, Biting Cold, and Elemental Destruction. These 3 things will work together to reduce the enemy elemental resistance by almost 60%, which is a huge amount. That is much better than fueling, and of course this can scale with Curse Effect, making it even more effective. The rest of the skills will start with our main skill is Flame Slash. You can put any penetration gem in here due to your hero traits. Cold Pen will count as Fire Pen. You can use Fire Pen as well. Then we're going to use Raging Slash because this is a steep strike. Slash Duet, same reason, and then Steamroll. This can easily be swapped to Precision Strike when you're fighting against bosses. Steamroll is just going to be more comfortable for maps as it provides more AoE. Spiral Strike is going to be what you use to get around. You can swap this to Frigid Transmission when you're against bosses. Gives you an extra cold skill to spam within that Frostfire Rampage window when you're going to be dealing the maximum damage. Fearless Warcry grants a massive damage multiplier to your Flame Slash. You should always use this just as you're about to hit that Frostfire Rampage window. Compound Source is your health skill. It's going to keep you alive. And then Bull's Rage again. The way that your buffs work on this build is as soon as you hit Frostfire Rampage or are just about to, you need to make sure they're all up. It is 90% of your damage, if not more, is inside that window. This is a very burst orientated build as opposed to how it was previously. For the final passives, we then have Elemental Amplification, Flame Imbue, Summon Flame Spirit, Magical Source, and Swiftness. You may have to cut one of these early on. Obviously we're not going to have access to a Restrain and your mana might be a bit tight. We'll move on to the talents. We are going with God of Might and Warlord, very similar to Season 1, except we do not use the fueling talent. We now want to pay attention to those resistances instead of completely ignoring them with fueling. So we have to take another option. There aren't that many great ones in this tree. We do go with Great Strength. One thing I will say is just check in the description of this video for these talents. They may have changed, but this is, as of this moment of recording, the best selection I can come up with, but just double check. Onto the Warlord, we go with Sweep. Wildfire is perfectly fine. Rock as well if you're feeling a bit squishy. Bosses definitely go with Wildfire. Sweep is more effective when you're mapping for the radius. And then again, another swap you can do. True Flame is going to be for map clear. Focus Strike for bossing. 40% additional area damage. You attack enemies right at the center, which is really important for this skill because you've got all those Steep Strike Flame Slashes that overlap when you're stood right next to the mob. And then we are going into Ranger. Obviously, it was nerfed. We don't get further from here anymore. We are going to have to get that from another source. But it does still provide some nice major talents like Gravity and Impending. So they're the talents. As for the gear, early on, you're going to want to dual wield swords. You want to get some physical damage added to this gear. You can be flat or gear physical percent damage. Also try and get some fire damage on there as well. And if you're lucky enough to find some damage penetration, it is an ominous mod, so it might be difficult to get your hands on. That is also a great choice. As well as that, you can get some multi-strike chance in the suffix, some critical strike damage, some attack speed, some crit strike rating. All these are great choices. You need 2 of these. They don't have to be tier 1 mods like the one showed. To get you towards T7, you just need a good combination of all these modifiers. It could be 5 mods and an enchant. These will be more than enough to get you going. Outside of that, you've got legendary items such as Mark of the Thrill to give you access to further rating, or another pair of gloves called Malevolent Hand that are going to give you that +1 curse. Until you get these gloves, or you manage to get your hands on a Restless crafted chest with +1 curse, you are going to have to drop one of your curses from the cast on crit setup. This is hard to avoid. There aren't many sources of +1 curse in the game. You could get lucky and corrode an amulet, maybe from leveling with +1 curse effect, or maybe try snipe one off the auction house. That would not be a bad shout. Other than that, you're just looking to fill out the gear with resistances, flat fire damage, flat physical damage, and of course as much life as you can manage. Some other good legendary options to look out for are things like the Sky Devourer strength armor. Maybe you can get your hands on a broken sun ring. But outside of that, some luxury stats or things like curse effect, elemental penetration, or maybe you can even get something like physical damage added as fire damage on the boots. These are all quite exotic mods. They're quite difficult to get, but if you do get lucky enough to find them, some great additions to the build. Now finally, as for the hero traits, very similar to last league, Ice and Fire works in the following way. You get max fusion energy +4 when you first start as Frostfire Gemma. And this fusion energy is gained by triggering fire or cold skills. It gives you some fire damage and cold damage, which once you get to level 13, start applying to one another. When you deal damage at max fusion energy, those bonuses apply to one another. It's quite a large buff early on, 20% per point, which is 80. And then you get 160 during Frostfire Rampage. Even early on, all your damage is focused around being in that state of max fusion energy. Of course, having max fusion energy means it is going to take you longer to get to that Frostfire Rampage. It is worth it. You just need to plan your buffs around it. Level 50, we've already spoken about Restless Ice Fire, giving you that 60% additional damage if you manage to trigger 3 cold skills during the Rampage. It'll add 30% additional cold damage, which will then translate to fire damage as well. Glacial Flames is the level 62 talent, gives you an extra 4 max energy, so at this point you will have 10. And the fusion energy gains an additional effect, and that is +2 additional fire and cold damage for every point of fusion energy. So what this means is you get 20% all the time, well, assuming you're at max. And then when you hit Frostfire Rampage, the additional cold damage also applies to the fire. So all these effects are basically doubled when they apply to one another. And then finally, seeping in is kind of the thing we're building around, which is that the cold resistance of the enemy is counted as their fire resistance, and also that fire and cold pen count for one another. Whether this double dips or not remains to be seen. I will do some testing to try and find out. As for the hero relics and memories, the relics, they give you some extra fusion energy. I do not have many yet, so I can't tell you exactly what they do. You also get some fusion energy effect. This would be a great one to get, but of course this is legendary, so I don't know how common it's going to be. And then I am unsure what you get here. I'm assuming it's going to be max energy effect. Also, you've got movement speed, life, resistance, all that kind of stuff. I will update this in the builder in the description as soon as I get more information.